Todd Davidson is the travel director for Travel Oregon. He has served for many years with U.S. Travel Association. They have different sections, and he's been a leader in many committees and many of the operations of how the travel industry organizes itself to advance the mission of recognition and really creating that impact of what the travel industry does for the United States. Todd's been recognized as Outstanding Travel Director of the Year multiple times. I had the pleasure of being in a meeting where he was honored twice, and so I every time he accepts such an honor, it's very warming to know how he's well liked and respected, but also how he knows that this is a team event and activity, and he shares that graciously. I asked Todd to come here to end this session today so that we know what Oregon has, and so we know what kind of partnership opportunities there are, and that we're charged up and ready to climb the hill to say, we want ours too. So join me in welcoming Todd Davidson.
It is so good to be able to be here with you guys, especially on a day as important as this. And I want each and every one of you to know right from the onset that I understand if you have an appointment that starts at 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock, and you need to slip out. I will not take it as an offense in the slightest, okay? Because those meetings up on the Hill are the most important thing that you're doing here. And you folks have been given the information and the tools that you need to go make some magic happen for the state of Washington. And I want you to know that matters to me. And that matters to those of us on the other side of the river, because I got the phone calls when you closed your office. I heard from all the media up here about how there must be dancing in the street in Oregon. And I asked, why? What would ever give you the impression that we would be celebrating the closing of the state tourism office in the state of Washington? And they were like, well, we just assumed. And I said, you assumed that we would see this as having one less competitor out there that we had to worry about. And they said, well, yeah. I said, then you don't get the industry. Because before people decide where they're going to travel, they have to first decide if they're going to travel. And what we have lost in Oregon is a very near and dear partner who was investing millions of dollars a year encouraging people to travel. And we've lost that voice. It's been essentially silenced. And we've also lost a great partner internationally. Because we don't go to Germany and Japan and China and other places and talk about only Oregon. That would not only be myopic, but it would be incredibly ineffective, because it's not how they travel. It is not how our international visitors travel. They look at us as the Pacific Northwest. It might be British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. It might be Washington, Oregon, Northern California, but they envision the U.S. Pacific Northwest. And we've lost that partnership. We've lost those resources. We've lost that voice. As Chris talked about earlier, that ability to tell your story. Now, there were great allies that obviously came in when your office was closed. And you celebrated, and rightfully so, the founding five. 5 folks, 5 organizations that got together and said, we're not going to stand for this. We need to do something together. And they formed what is today the WTA. So I want you to know from the onset that closing the office here was never a joyful thing for us. And we in Oregon have been as saddened that there is no office here for all the same reasons that you are as well. I also want you to know, in the same way that Chris talked about, you are the ones that are keeping the dream alive. You also have to be the ones to evangelize that dream. You have to stay tenacious. When Oregon went forward with a statewide lodging tax bill, we called it the Oregon Tourism Investment Proposal in 2003, a lot of folks look at that as basically this incredible bellwether for the state tourism industry in Oregon. But much like you, the first time we approached the legislature was 1999. And then we went back in 2001. And then the bill was finally passed in 2003. These things are never easy. There's a reason that people draw the analogy that watching legislation pass is much like watching sausage being made. Yeah, it's not pretty. It's delicious, but it's not necessarily the prettiest thing to see. What's exciting for us right now, I think, is that we are witnessing a resurgence at the national level and at the regional level as well. And I think the fact that you're hearing no expressed opposition to what it is you're wanting to do at this point, I attribute that to the fact that we're witnessing this resurgence in travel and a renaissance in the awareness of the power of the travel and tourism industry. We've come through an incredibly defining economic period, there's no doubt about it. We were hemorrhaging jobs for a while. We had modest overall economic recovery, great periods of uncertainty. So the impacts on our consumers that we all experienced in 2008, 9, and 10, the loss of discretionary income, the concerns from our consumers about job losses, and the drop in consumer confidence. You know, economists will tell you that a healthy economy shows up as a consumer confidence score of about 90. We just passed that number in December of last year when we hit about 93. In January, we hit 102.9, a beautiful thing. But in the depths of the Great Recession, consumer confidence actually dropped to 25. That gives you an idea of the mindset of the folks that we were still trying to encourage to take travel with limited discretionary income. So into this environment, the Medford, Oregon Mail Tribune wrote this editorial. A spate of recent reports has established a consistent theme. The Oregon economy is improving, but not fast enough to provide relief to many of the people bruised by the Great Recession. If Oregon wants to break out of this rut, the state needs a game changer. Oregon's periods of greatest economic growth generally have been helped along by some identifiable trend or event that made the state attractive for job creators and job seekers alike. So Oregon needs a game changer. How about the fact that visitors spent $9.6 billion in Oregon in 2013? And the research that we also use, Runyon and Associates, by the way, the research indicated that the growth that we experienced that year was our best growth in a decade, and it was driven by increased visitation, not by inflation. And that $9.6 billion is now supporting 94,000 good jobs for Oregonians. But there's still folks that say Oregon needs a game changer. Well, how about the fact that our international markets are now generating over 2 million international visits a year? It's over $500 million in economic impact. We've been able to expand the number of markets that we're actually reaching out to through co-ops and partnerships. China alone is up 300% in visitation to Oregon since 2008. China alone. Still not the number one overseas market, by the way. They're like number 4. But a 300% growth since 2008, and that's before 10-year visa validity. That's before we improved the visa process in general. We were seeing that kind of growth. Nationally, as Chris alluded to in his remarks, we've seen Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker come out and talk about how international visitors shattered, her words, shattered the spending record in 2013, generating $180 billion that year. This means international visitors to the United States were spending $1.3 billion more every month than they had the year before. No other segment of the economy was generating those kinds of returns. And here's what's so vitally important to capture in that. To reinforce Chris's comment, please don't let this be lost on you, because you are, like Oregon is, an export-dependent state. And travel and tourism is an export. Do not let anybody tell you that it is not. So what's happening here for the United States, travel and tourism is now America's largest services export. The largest. We make up 8%, as you saw from Chris's slides, we make up 8% of all exports. But you know something? In 2013, we accounted for 24% of all export growth. All export growth. 1 out of every $4 in increased exports, new exports, came from the travel and tourism industry, even though we only represent 8% of total exports. And still folks talk about how Oregon needs a game changer. How about as policy leaders and elected officials are seeking to find solutions to very trying social issues, striving to identify revenue to meet burgeoning demand, perhaps there could be a recognition that in Oregon, visitors are generating $400+ million a year in state and local tax revenue alone. In fact, in Oregon, visitors generate 20% of our highway fund. I love reminding our legislature that 1 out of every $5 they're appropriating to fix the roads is coming because we have a vibrant tourism industry. And I would imagine with a little digging, you could probably find a very similar number here in the great state of Washington as well. How about the fact that American households would have had to have spent $1,000 more every year in taxes were it not for visitors generating tax revenue in lieu of American households having to generate those taxes instead. My friends, we have an amazing story to tell. And that story is that the tourism industry is a legitimate, economy-driving, revenue-generating, community-stabilizing job creator. And that's why I do what I do. I'm in the job creation business, and so are you. During this time of economic recovery, the U.S. travel and tourism industry must remain laser-focused on strategically positioning our experiences, innovating new products and technologies, and leveraging one another's voice and resources. You know, one of the beautiful things about the travel and tourism industry is that we are a forward-looking industry. We learn from the past, of course, but we're always resolutely focused on the future. How can we improve the experience of a visitor by just 1% more? At the same time, though, we must also realize that tourism does so much more than just that direct economic impact from visitors traveling to our state and spending dollars in hotels and restaurants and attractions and transportation and art galleries and so many other businesses. Travel and tourism also introduces our products to visitors as well. Our visitors travel to our destination, they enjoy those products, and they travel home with an affinity for this place and for those products. In Oregon, this has always kind of been a working hypothesis of ours, you know, that if we invite people to Oregon and they have a great vacation experience and they return home saying they could check that box, I am very satisfied with my Oregon vacation experience, we've done half our job. Instead, if we could bring folks to Oregon and have their experience be so transformative that when they returned home, they were changed. They were just a little bit more Oregonian in their behavior, whether they were returning home to Manhattan or Munich or Miami. And oh, by the way, I would take that as a compliment if they were returning home a little bit more Oregonian in their behavior. But here's what I mean by that. What if they started seeking Oregon wines on the wine list because they've been in Oregon? What if they started looking for that new craft beer that they'd been exposed to at their favorite corner tavern, or asked for them to see if they could get it because of their Oregon experience? What if they started looking for, name the Oregon product, Leatherman Tools, Columbia, Nike, Keen, Hydro Flask, you know, all these various products, Pendleton blankets. You know, you can do the same. Well, we did the research, and what we found out is that 33% of our visitors said that they purchased Oregon products several times after returning home, several times. That number goes to almost 60% that had purchased Oregon products at least a few times since they'd vacationed in Oregon. Nice numbers. And you better believe I went directly to my Department of Agriculture director and said, guess what we're doing? You know, we're actually helping drive demand for these agricultural products because we now had the research with which we could back it up. The other thing, though, that's interesting, and the reason I have this particular slide up there, is that we've also learned that folks that travel to Oregon on vacation become business prospects for economic development specialists as well. The story that you see up here is one that we worked with Oregon Business Magazine on specifically. It's a story of a gentleman by the name of John Bauer. John came to Oregon on vacation. John's a fly fisherman. Gotta love that about him, I do personally. So John came to Oregon to go fly fishing. He fished the Williamson River down in Klamath County. He brought the family along with him. They visited Crater Lake National Park, and then they stopped off in Ashland at the because they wanted to take in the Shakespeare Festival, because he had children, middle school and high school age kids, who were very interested in the performing arts. And they returned home. I will leave the name of that state off my remarks, but they returned home to another state. And he and his wife looked at each other across the dining room table basically and said, why don't we live there? And they moved John's business and 35 jobs to Southern Oregon. And oh, by the way, John's company is Bauer Fly Reels, and they manufacture these beautiful high-end fly fishing reels that some of which you see here on the screen. But that wouldn't have happened had John not come with his family to Oregon on vacation. So my fellow game changers, the facts are simple, and the facts are these: that in addition to that direct economic impact of travel and tourism that we're all very adept at talking about, we also have to remind the legislators today that travel and tourism also has the ability to impact awareness of and demand for agricultural products, to leverage those business recruitment efforts happening across the state, and to enhance the livability in your communities as new assets and amenities are added, developed, and built. Well, how do you go about amplifying an opportunity like that? Well, you don't settle. You don't rest. You keep pushing for more. More value for every dollar you're entrusted with, more alignment, more leverage, from that business level to the local destination marketing organization, the state DMO, and then leveraging the heck out of a program like Brand USA. Now, before Travel Oregon adopted their most recent current strategic plan, we brought it forward to our industry partners. And there were three imperatives that arose from our dialogue that I want to be sure and share with you today. They were maximizing statewide economic impact, emphasis on the word statewide, supporting and empowering our partners. This has to be a virtuous cycle, and championing the value of the travel and tourism industry. So let me explore these with you just one at a time. If someone feels that Oregon, in my case, Washington and yours, needs that game changer, we have to first and foremost be prepared to tell our story about how we are part of something truly powerful. And we need to help them understand that we are the game changer that they're looking for. So the first imperative from our strategic plan is championing the value of tourism. We saw it as a necessity from the State Tourism Office to unleash the energy, the voice of our partners across the state. I mentioned the Oregon Business Magazine articles. We run these quarterly, telling various aspects of the travel and tourism industry that most folks wouldn't think would ever be attributed to the travel and tourism industry. Stories like John Bauer's, came here on a vacation and now. We're telling stories about career paths in the industry because many folks like to talk about, for some reason, they envision this industry as being little more than part-time minimum wage seasonal employment. And it's like, what industry are you talking about? There may be some elements in the economy that are part-time minimum wage seasonal employment, okay. But all work is honorable. And the career paths that our industry affords folks, I'd be interested to know how many legislators you speak to today had their first job in the travel and tourism industry and then moved on to other things. It might have been that job that helped them pay off their student loans. This is the industry where people often learn work maturity skills to show up on time, right dress, right attitude, ready to go to work. And then they either move up within the industry or choose to move off into another career path. All perfectly good, but it certainly doesn't discount the role this industry plays in the economy. We've also put together a series of videos that we call Communities Powered by Travel, because we have a program called the Rural Tourism Studio where we're going into communities where we're invited And they've decided that they want to really focus in on how tourism can be a bigger part of their economy. So we go back in after bringing these communities together. They have to form a steering committee. We work with them for several months with a variety of different modules, from marketing to product development to you name it. And then we go back in a couple of years to measure what the effect is. These videos are all available on our website. If you were to go to industry.traveloregon.com, our consumer site is traveloregon.com. Just put the word industry in front of it, industry.traveloregon.com, and you can see some of these communities powered by travel videos where we're telling the stories of how these communities have transformed. The community of Oak Ridge is now a huge mountain biking capital. They've been named an IMBA Ride Center for their mountain biking product development. They've secured hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants from the Forest Service to develop additional mountain biking product. They've had 14 new small businesses open in their downtown since the Rural Tourism Studio concluded. These are the kinds of stories we want to be sure and share and celebrate. And then we also make sure that we're out during National Travel and Tourism Week. We travel the state. We're sitting right there alongside our DMO partners, meeting with the editorial boards. And my best example of that was when we went to the great city of Pendleton, Oregon, and I'm sitting there with the chamber director, and it turns out that her kids are in the same preschool with the editor of the local paper. That's the kind of relationship that helps get you ink. And it keeps them asking questions, so it's not just during National Travel and Tourism Week, but tourism now stays front of mind for them throughout the year. Our last National Travel and Tourism Week media tour resulted in 85 million impressions, broadcast in print. And there's only 4 million Oregonians, so we were hammering them at least 20 times when you stop and think about it during the course of that week with the messages that we had out there. The second imperative is to make sure that we're supporting and empowering our partners. I mentioned the Rural Tourism Studio. We've had 1,000 Oregonians so far that have gone through the various rural tourism studios. We've also kicked off a statewide agricultural tourism development working group. We've developed a very extensive bicycle-friendly business program. It was the first program of its kind in the country. We drafted off some inventive work that was being done by a gentleman in John Day, Oregon, who had come up with a program that he called Two Wheels Spoken Here. And that became the bicycle-friendly business program that is now statewide, hundreds of businesses that are participating in it. We've also given rise to the Scenic Bikeway program that we work on collaboratively with our state Parks and Recreation Department. Over a dozen scenic bikeways have now been designated throughout the state. Again, no other state has had a program like this Scenic Bikeway program. And then we build toolkits about our advertising and all the work that we're doing to make sure that our partners can leverage the millions of dollars we're putting in to the market to encourage travel to and within the state. We've also made sure that we're keeping Oregon, Oregon. So we started a program called Travel Oregon Forever, and one component of that is the Oregon Travel Philanthropy Fund. If you're familiar with staying at a lodge in a national park and they may ask you to make a voluntary contribution of $1 a night, or something like that, we've started piloting a program similar to that in Oregon, only it's not in the national parks or the national forests, it's any hotel. And so far, consumers have contributed over $70,000 that we've been able to put back into projects that are restoring watersheds and salmon habitat. Great environmental programs, great stewardship programs that are going to help make sure we keep Oregon, Oregon. In March of last year, HSMAI actually recognized Travel Oregon with their Platinum Level Leader in Sustainable Tourism Award. And one of the reasons for this recognition was the efforts that we put into encouraging consumers to share in our commitment to keep Oregon that amazing destination to travel forever.
In Oregon, we have a thing about guarding our amazing outdoor places and the way we go about living, and we're not afraid to show the world. It's why our beaches, peaks, rivers, and forests, and traditions handed down for centuries will continue to flourish for you, your kids, their kids, and on and on. Along the way, we've learned a lot of you care about the same things too, and you can help. With the Oregon Travel Philanthropy Fund, steeped in the Oregon ethic of conservation, the fund has just one goal: ensure this state will forever remain a place we all love and love to explore. It's pretty simple. Contribute today at givebacktooregon.org, or on your next Oregon adventure, visit businesses that support the fund and make a contribution while you're here. Either way, we'll make sure you're investing in projects across Oregon that make us a better place to visit, like repairs to biking and hiking trails, restoring habitats to save wild fish runs, and preserving historic spots where Oregon culture can thrive. So when you return, you'll appreciate your favorite places even more. Come see Oregon. Give to the Oregon Travel Philanthropy Fund and turn your journey into a legacy.
You know, when you live in the great Pacific Northwest like we all do, our visitors kind of come to expect environmental stewardship to just kind of be part of our ethos. And so we think a program like this is incredibly consistent with the brand. It's what our consumers expect. In fact, we went out and did some research and found out that 85% of the visitors coming to Oregon or planning trips to Oregon in the future self-identify themselves as being environmentally conscious. So a program like this is just about driving home that brand story in a way that they can actually participate and have a little skin in the game as well. The third imperative is maximizing statewide economic impact. In our global sales arena, you know, we do international trainings, we've done research, we're participating in 23 different trade shows. I remember when we used to have the resources to do 3. There was a day, my friends, before the Oregon Tourism Investment Proposal passed in 2003, that our budget was then 47th in the country. And we had about $135,000 a year we were spending in our international marketing program. We could get to 3 international trade shows. This year we're in 23 international trade shows, dozens of research trips, hundreds of Oregon partners that are working with us. In 1994, as I mentioned at the onset, we were in 3 or 4 different markets. Today we have active marketing representation in over a dozen global markets. And this just kind of transcends all the various programs that we're in, whether we're producing content, whether we're accessing social media. We now have an integrated marketing team that includes the management of our social media community. We have 4 different folks that are on that team managing all the various social media channels, our websites, all of the content for our visitor guide, e-newsletters, you name it. I mean, we're making sure that the brand message is conveyed comprehensively, thoroughly, and effectively throughout. One particular program that I wanted to be sure and touch on, because it's one that we worked on collaboratively, was one called the Western Wine Trail. And this involved Washington, Oregon, California, and Brand USA. It's the first multi-state partnership that Brand USA had actually gotten involved in from an itinerary standpoint. And we 3 states came together with very little resource and developed a program called the Western Wine Trail. Immediately translated it into German, took it to ITB, one of the biggest trade shows that happens in the world every year over in Berlin. It was so wildly successful that a month later we translated it into Portuguese, and I took it with me in a sales mission to Brazil because there was so much interest in this program. Then Travel Channel Europe found out about it, and it became the West Coast Wine Adventure.
I'm Ollie. I'm Jenny. We're on the west coast of the USA for the ultimate wine adventure.
Fabulous food, faces and places.
We're uncorked and ready for the road trip of a lifetime.
It's so bright! It's like the trail of a comet casting itself across my palate.
You do the wine, I'll do the food.
Absolutely brilliant.
It's fruity, it's aromatic.
Imagine the world's most glorious cherry, amped up to 1,000,000.
Hurrah!
Hurrah, cheers.
Cheers!
Now, if you're familiar with Travel Channel Europe, you know that it's the world's leading international travel broadcaster. That show, they thought they were going to have enough content to do 1 program. They wound up doing 4. Unfortunately, the one asterisk I have to put on this is it was from Portland to San Francisco. Because at the time, there wasn't resource available here in Washington to make sure that it covered the entire trail. They want to come back. They want to do a second wine trail because this first one was so wildly successful. 22 languages, 6.2 million affluent households saw this. 4 episodes, multiple weeks, airing for 3 years. It was also then picked up by the International Food Network, which transmitted it into 6 languages, 94 additional countries. Amazing leverage. And like I said, they're eager to come back. Ultimately, with the drive to maximize statewide economic impact, I'm excited to stand before you today and share with you some of our performance metrics, because I know at the end of the day, that's truly where it's going to start resonating with legislators. You know, are you generating that kind of return on investment? You saw Chris's numbers earlier today. Well, the results from our most recent economic impact, which we measured our fall 2012, spring 2013 campaign, found this. First of all, let me provide you some context. And we do this study like every 4 years. Went out in 2004, our cost to generate a new trip to Oregon was $1.31 in media spend. Pretty doggone good to begin with. But in 2008, we had gotten even more efficient and dropped that to $1.14. Now that's with inflation, increasing costs of media and everything else, but we had dropped the cost to generate a trip to $1.14. In 2012, 2013, the most recent one that we did, we dropped it to 99 cents. Even more efficient than we had been, 15% more efficient in fact. The amount of visitor spending per advertising dollars was up 23% over 2008. The amount of tax revenue generated per every advertising dollar was up 37% over 2008. Here's the bottom line. We spent $1.8 million in that advertising campaign. It generated almost 2 million trips with a $425 million visitor spending increase, $19 million in new taxes. And in Oregon, we accomplished this by working together. We set aside geopolitical boundaries that really don't mean a whole heck of a lot to our visitors. And since we're like everyone else in the tourism industry, and not willing to rest on our laurels, we recognized that there was even more that could be done. So we dove into the most recent research on consumer behavior. We stepped back from all of the preconceived notions about what marketing should be. Remained laser focused on generating demand for travel statewide. And the result was a little thing called the 7 Wonders of Oregon.
Mount Hood was left off the list. So was the Oregon coast. The Columbia River Gorge was somehow overlooked, as were the Painted Hills. Smith Rock and the Wallowas are both missing from it. All we can figure is whoever named the 7 Wonders of the world never set foot in Oregon. Because even Crater Lake was left off their list. So we see your wonders, world, and raise you 7 of our own. And we invite you to come experience them. Our wonders aren't just for looking at. You have to explore them, feel them beneath your feet. Just remember, this is Oregon, so how you go about doing that is entirely up to you. The 7 Wonders of Oregon. See one, or better yet, see them all.
Yeah, oh, thanks. You know, I got to tell you guys, I'm excited for you. I'm excited by what I heard last night at the board meeting. I'm excited by what I'm hearing as I sit here with you today. You are not folks that are willing to rest on your laurels or settle for just meeting some goal. Nope. You're a little bit more driven than that. Together, we're making every effort we can to squeeze one more trip out of every dollar that we're entrusted with, help one more business or one more community find its place in the tourism industry, enhance the warmth of a visitor's experience here in Washington by just one more degree. And as a result, gain that greater market share of visitor spending that can help one more person find employment that enables them to provide a little better life for themselves and for those they love. And for that, I am forever grateful. Thank you very much.